Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 word and to some reaction to the 2023 Spanish Grand Prix from the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya. Why name the circuit? Because I just love saying it. That's all I'm going to say. What do we reckon to that? Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are in the world. Hope you're having a good one. It's a lovely day here in the UK. Not really a great day for stuck inside watching F1, but hey, I'd still do that whatever the weather, so it's good stuff. Hope you're all well. Yeah, interesting race, that one. I actually quite enjoyed that. I've seen some people on Twitter bitching and moaning that it's boring because people just will. I think the poll that we've got going at the moment is about right. A lot of people saying average and good. I think that's about right. Enough strategy intrigue there to keep us interesting. There was lots of action through the field. Look, I say it every week now, and I think people probably get sick of me saying this, but if you come into Formula One in 2023 only interested in who's going to win the race in the World Championship, you're going to have a very disappointing season. If you focus on the racing, as I was discussing with somebody last night in the comment section of one of my videos, if you are focused on the racing behind that and what's going on, it's actually quite a good season so far. Not amazing at the front, of course it isn't, but, you know, bit more sweat in George Russell's visor, and that could have been an epic race in the end, and you'd have all have loved it with a bit of wet sweat on the track. Anyway, we'll come back to that a little bit later. Bit of a weird one, but yeah, I enjoyed that. I'm not sure what I give it. Again, maybe another one of those sevens, just ever so slightly above average, perhaps. Some will disagree, of course, but that's the beauty of doing this channel. So there you go. CPB1 says 6 out of 10 for me. So yeah, average, 7 for Mike. I think that's about right. I don't think it was bad. It was okay. I tell you what, I've certainly seen worse in France. In Spain, I've seen a lot worse in France, but pretty much worse in Spain. That was all right. 6 out of 10 for Nick. Clansom 7.5. Irene says 7. Valentine says 7. Granny says 7. Brian says 6.5. Brian hedging his bets there. I love that. Everett says 5 out of 10. Good one, Brian. I like that. 6.5, Sean. 6.5. Should we jump on to it? We'll run through the field as we always do. I am joined today for the first time on the channel, so make him feel welcome. By Freddie Coates. Good evening, Freddie. Welcome to welcome to the F1 word, I guess. How are you?
Yeah, evening, Sean. I'm doing all right. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to rate that race. I think probably a 5.5, 6.
Oh, hedging your bets even more. I like that. we had a 6.5, which isn't terrible. I like that one. Yeah. No, I think, as I say, we've certainly seen worse races in Barcelona, haven't we? But I think, like I said at the start, if people come into a race expect or only really interested in the winner, then pretty miserable season for them, isn't it, this year?
You've got to look for the P2 fight, which actually was pretty interesting and not at all what I expected to happen with the Mercedes pace.
Yeah, apologies that Freddie's mic was a bit loud there. I had it turned up because Nate on Wednesday was a little bit quieter, and I forgot to turn it down before we went live, so I think you've just blown eardrums out, Freddie. It's not your fault, mate. It's my fault this end. But just before we roll on to this, because it is your first time on the channel, I always ask people this. Do you want to let people know what you do and who you are, and plug anything you want to plug as well, actually? I know you've got a podcast, so...
Yeah, well, I'm Freddie. I do an F1 podcast, basically, with some mates, and currently I work in motorsport PR, and have done a few bits and pieces around motorsport F1 media. Used to do a bit of writing with WTF1 a couple of years ago, and Autosport Academy, things like that. A lot of the time I just like to chat about F1 and lots of motorsport and just get deep with it. My Twitter's Freddie Coates 1999, and you can see whatever I'm doing there, basically.
Yeah, I've put Freddie's link tree in the description as well for anyone who wants to go and follow him and check out the podcast. It's the Winging It. Is it the Winging It podcast F1 or the Winging It F1 podcast? I've got the wrong way around, haven't I?
Winging It F1 podcast we go for. I think that's a pretty decent title. It's just absolute random discussion, as I'm sure you're used to.
Yeah, that's the best kind. It's the best kind. We've got so many pundits, Freddie, on TV. It's nice just to have fans just come and just talk nonsense for what's supposed to be 90 minutes with me, but often turns into about 6 months. We'll see how we go. But yeah, let's hop. We'll run through the order. I'd like to do that first, and we'll try and keep it as brief as we can. But really, there was quite a lot of action behind the leader. My initial notes for Verstappen, I won't swear, I won't tell you exactly what it says, but elbows out to fend off Sainz at turn 1 at the start, and then disappeared into the distance. I think the most dramatic things for him, he had overheating fronts at one stage on the hards, struggling a bit under braking, and that was around lap 44, and then got 2 warnings for track limits, followed by a black and white flag on lap 59, and then he went and set the fastest lap and went 53 points clear of Sergio Perez. Sorry, Max Verstappen fans, I've not got much more than that, because that was about as dominant as I think Well, I was going to say, as we've seen this season, but I feel like we're saying that every week now. He's absolutely dominating. There's 53 points clear. I said it in midweek. If Checo has a pointless race, then it's over. I don't think fourth is pointless. In fact, it isn't pointless. It's 12 points. But he needed second today, didn't he, Freddie? Absolute worst to Checo. But that was domination from Verstappen today.
Oh yeah, Max was cruising. He did a brilliant job. I'm trying to think what session he didn't top this weekend. I think it might just be Q1, and I can't remember Q2. But he was just on it. And like you say, if the only issue is some track limits late in the race, then that's absolutely fine. Checo needed to kind of do what George did, but starting on the hards really didn't help that cause. And yeah, I don't know. He's still the second driver, but it does. Christian Horner said something really interesting after the race, that it might take the pressure off him, which means he can just race and relax a bit with it. But I'm not really sure whether that's just a good PR line or whether it actually would work. But yeah, I feel like the last two races have really hit home for Checo, that maybe it was a bit of a Bottas title fight rather than anything else.
Yeah, Nate said that in midweek, that we keep talking about Bottas 2. We kept talking about Bottas 2.0 and 3.0 and 4.0, and maybe that's what we'll get with Perez this year, which is, again, it's just an example of how good Max Verstappen is as a driver, that he's able to, because that's the thing, isn't it? A driver can dominate. We've seen it in F1 so many times with Schumacher and Hamilton. I think 19 and 20 were pretty much cruise control for much of the season, it felt like, thinking back, and Schumacher did it in 04 and 2002 as well, very dominant. We've seen it with McLaren in the late 80s, but you can still look at what Verstappen's doing and all those drivers I just mentioned and say, look, wow, they are, appreciate that and really give them the credit and the respect they deserve, because whatever you might think of Red Bull and where they are, I know a lot of people have very strong opinions on that. Max Verstappen is still getting the best out of that car, and he's delivering for the team. So I think he's been fantastic this season, absolutely brilliant today. And I hate calling it after 7 races, but in terms of a championship fight, maybe it is pretty much done now. That's 2 race wins and 2 fastest laps clear of his main rival, who happens to be his teammate, who's had a soppy couple of weekends. And then we've got maybe to look now for the battle for P2 in the constructors, and maybe even the battle for P2 in the drivers if Mercedes are back. We'll get to Mercedes shortly, but just so comfortable for Verstappen today. And as you say, if the biggest problem he's got is black and white flag for track limits, then wow, what would other drivers give to be in that position? Seriously.
I don't think anyone could have done what he did today anyway in that car. Like, you look at, I know we're talking about him dominating and things like that, but if his teammate's then 4th, it really just stands out for Max at how good he's performing in Formula One at the moment.
Yeah, not much more to add on Max Verstappen. Just on Sergio Perez,
there isn't. There
just isn't. It's not. It's nothing against him, and I'm not trying to dismiss what he's done. But other than repeating what I've said for the last few Grand Prix about him, there's not really much I can say. So we'll leave it there on Max. I'm sure there'll be some questions about him later in the championship. We'll come to that in Q&A. But Perez, one of the things today from much of the field was the move around the outside of turn 1, obviously aided by DRS, but we saw some really nice moves, and Perez made a nice one on the outside of Zhou for P8 on lap 9. Early pit stoppers, didn't pit early at all, that's somebody else, but he pitted on lap 27 for the hards. I thought he was going for the one stop, didn't decide to go with that in the end, was pushing hard to try and catch Russell. I thought there was a point where I thought they were going for a one stop and that maybe he was net P2. And that would actually be quite epic, but I don't think the tyres were holding on for that. And I think Mercedes would have picked him off towards the end as the tyre life went off. But did you think he might have got Russell towards the end, Freddie? The commentary were trying to big it up. I wasn't convinced that he could do, even with that Red Bull, 6 seconds in what was about 6 or 7 laps, wasn't it? He was going to need a lot to not only catch him, but to pass Russell.
I think you just needed to have not had Russell have such a good start to his final stint as well. I think without that, then Perez maybe could have got close. But yeah, it was, there's a lap and a half to go, and he might close 5.5 seconds, which I did think was nice and optimistic. And he was going much faster, but it wasn't fast enough. It wasn't anywhere near the fastest lap pace, and it just it was really kind of probably 2 laps too late to put those tyres on to make that for a last lap pass. So even for a comfortable fight with a few laps to go, it just didn't really quite fit in with where the Mercedes pace was. I think the Merc pace and George's pace in that fight didn't help Checo.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I'm just trying to think. Was it, I think, Spain one year, Hungary another year, where Hamilton and Verstappen kind of reversed roles, didn't they, and stuck on fresh tyres late on and managed to close that gap. And I wondered if he might do that. But what my biggest surprise for Perez today was how much he struggled to come through the field as quickly as, say, Verstappen did in Miami, for example, or in other places this season. I thought he cruised through, but I think, and I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, and chat as well, but I think I heard out the corner of my ear as I was setting the stream up, Perez say something about it was quite difficult to follow today or to get close. So maybe that's something that is just a knock-on effect of these incredibly clever designers finding ways to get around the rules and increasing dirty air, I suppose. But I think the biggest surprise for me today from the whole race was, and I know we sort of had it last season, but how much overtaking we saw. Yes, that DRS is massively OP because it's such a long straight and you've got them off that final corner now super quick. But I still, Spain to me is always a race I think of as processional where nothing really happens. A bit of a Monaco, but on a proper track, if that makes sense. That's how I've always viewed Spain.
It's always been that track, isn't it? It's always been the really difficult to overtake track, even now with this, no chicane swooping track, which is a little bit better, which did help, and you could see that in the midfield. But I guess it goes back to Red Bull 10 years ago, where they put it on pole and blitz it, and then if they're in the pack, they couldn't overtake because it was so complicated, and the car just had that. It's designed for the front. Was obviously, if you're in the field, you'll change the wing a little bit to fight a bit more and have that top end speed. But you'd think that's the trait of the Red Bull is top end speed. So it doesn't quite add up. You'd think if any car could follow and pass or not have to worry about it, this year and last year has the traits been the Red Bull. So I think it is probably the Barcelona of it all that's piling up and not necessarily helping anyone. I mean, you had a good few little fights with the Alfas, the AlphaTauris, the Haases being able to dice, but Perez seemed to be stuck in the odd DRS train early in the race, and then that seemed to sort of spell fourth place for him.
Yeah, it was. I just thought he'd come through much quicker than he did, but I'll see if his press release comes in, or the press release comes in before the end, and see what he says in his quotes. But it'll be interesting if he said anything there. But I think he's disappointed yesterday in qualifying. The big mistake in Monaco that cost him dear. It just feels like, as you've already said, Freddie, we're going through that, or we hoped for that Bottas challenge, or the challenge that never came from Bottas. And I think that's maybe where we are with Perez. And that's, Max deserves the credit for what he's done this season. And Sergio just needs to make sure that really from Canada onwards, he's at least second place. He needs to be following his teammate home. But I think that's pretty much game over in terms of the championship. But again, that's just because of how good and consistent Max Verstappen has been. That's 7 podiums out of 7, 5 wins, 4 poles. And I think they said on Sky, 15 of the last 21 races have been won by a Red Bull as well. So, I mean, we really are in their latest era of domination, aren't we? This is very Hamilton, Mercedes, 1920, Schumacher, sort of 2000 not really 2001, but 2002 and 2004. This is their era. Seb 2013, of course. It just happens a lot in Formula One, and people don't like that, but that is what Formula One is. I always say that seasons like 2021 are more the exception than the rule in Formula One. It's maybe a bit of an exaggeration or not quite totally accurate, but that's just my view of it after watching for way too many years. I said in midweek, I'm ready to get a life now and give it up.
I agree. 10 years of thinking back to 2012, and then 2021 happened, and I guess we're waiting for 2031 now. I reckon you could say, if that's the little pattern. But I think you're right. It is. You do the exact right thing as Red Bull. If you've got a driver who's can work with a car in a particular way, you build it exactly for him. You follow the driver's input with Max, and it delivers and it works. And he's 25 seconds up at the end of the race in a race where he's not really pushing. He's a second off what he can do, because he proved that with his fastest lap. He was doing 17.2, 17.3, then just did a 16.3 as the fastest lap. And you just think, oh wow, if they were really pushing for this, then there's just so much that they can do with this car, and that Max can do. And you have the domination. Yeah, you're right. You have to appreciate the dominant performance, and you have to appreciate the drive. And I think actually it's been quite easy to appreciate the quality of the drives this year.
Yeah,
because you can look at some dominant seasons and sort of think, oh, it is really just not quite. It's so simple, but I really think that there's been a lot of essentially just, they're really punching down on everyone else whenever they do one lap.
Yeah, we used to see it with again with Hamilton, didn't we? It was the whole tyres are gone, and then everyone's sort of like, oh, maybe that's opened the door, and then boom, 2 seconds a lap quicker. That's an exaggeration, but he's like, oh, God. You thought you were going to get a race for the win, and it just doesn't happen. But it was a Grand Slam as well for Max. Just pointing that one out very, very quickly. Thank you to Valentine for your super chat. Massively appreciated, mate. Thank you very much for your support. A couple of people pointing out that Checo also had a very bad start. Not a great start at all, to be fair, from what I saw of Ant Davidson's analysis of it. A bit, certainly compared to George Russell. We'll get to him in just a second, but not a great start from Checo. And Nick says it's a motorcycle cycle track, not designed for F1. What I find interesting about Spain is that they went through all these modifications. Now we've ended up basically where we were before they made all their changes and sort of accepted it didn't really work. But let's roll on to Mercedes. We'll talk more about Red Bull later if anybody's got any questions. So Lewis Hamilton P2 today. I'm not gonna kick off and moan too much, but just to the guy on Thursday who called me a nobody because I predicted Hamilton for a podium. Fuck you, basically. Sorry, Freddie, but that's my answer to that one. So P2 for Lewis Hamilton, P3 for George Russell, double podium for Mercedes. Even I thought, to be fair, that Hamilton for a podium was an outside shot this weekend. I was not expecting them to land a double podium this weekend. I thought they might sneak one if things went their way. Maybe if Aston had a difficult weekend, which they kind of did in the end, but pretty solid. And actually a pretty comfortable second place, I think, for Lewis Hamilton today. And Toto Wolff making the point after the race that although the gap was 22 seconds, he thinks it was more sort of sub 15 because Hamilton backed off towards the end, is what he was saying. In fact, what was his last lap? I think I've got it here. So his last lap of the race was a 19.1 versus a 17.7 for Verstappen. So obviously Merckx, well, having said that, it was only a 10th slower than Russell, so I don't know. Maybe Toto just trying to manage expectations a bit there. I don't know, but yeah, I wasn't expecting. I expected a move forward, is what I'm saying, Freddie, but not expecting that jump forward from Mercedes. But I don't know how much of that is because Aston just didn't have the race pace today, and how much is the update. That's what we'll find out in the next few races, of course.
Yeah, I was surprised when watching Q3 on Saturday. It was very much like, oh, okay, so Perez and Russell are out. The P2 spot is a fight between Sainz, Hamilton, and not Alonso because of his damaged floor and things like that. And when you then had Gasly and whoever, Hamilton was fifth. Norris, of course.
Yes, Lando Norris. Oh dear,
Hamilton.
Yeah,
we'll get to that, I'm sure. But when you had that, I thought, oh, okay, yeah, no, this upgrade is clearly having a few teething issues, and Merck are in the same place as where they were. But in the first stint of the race, you had Hamilton then coming through, getting past Norris at the start, then getting passed by Stroll, but then being able to pass Stroll, pass Sainz, and then gap them and clear them. And that surprised me. When it cut to Hamilton overtaking Stroll, I thought it was going to be sat there all race and it was going to be Sainz, Stroll, P2, P3, because based on the form guide, they should be there, you'd have thought. But that is a big improvement for Mercedes, and the fact that Hamilton was able to cleanly do that, I do think the retroactive changes to the track, making it how it used to be, did help that. But it was a big improvement. It was it's good to see for Mercedes to do that, and I think it is the upgrade. To be honest, I do think it is the upgrade. Yeah. I think their race pace was very good. I think that's where it didn't really necessarily work in the qualifying. My kind of random theory for that is that they're just trying to ease into it a bit, and you can set the car up for the race a little bit more, I guess, with your first setups that you're trialing with it. But it worked, in my opinion. Aston have got a big upgrade coming up next time out, so I guess you'll have to see what comes with that.
Yeah, it's going to ebb and flow, isn't it? Quite a bit, I think. I think that'll be closer in Canada than it was this weekend. But just a good shout out. I put it in my notes after the Sky thing, but I'll give Random Bosman a shout out as well in chat. Says the cooler temps helped Mercedes for sure today, but they are looking better. I think the car looks more stable. Lewis Hamilton said after Monaco he thought it progressed, and I think the idea was to give the drivers a more stable car to build on for the rest of the year and into next year. So it's a good step forward. But yeah, the cooler temperatures. I think Toto Wolff described it as it was in the mega window for them, the temperatures, the track conditions and everything. So maybe that's helped them a bit, but I'm not trying to take away from their update. Of course, it's given them a boost. Whether or not they can hold that when Aston Martin sort of bring their upgrade and continue to improve, we shall see. He was 8.2 clear of Russell, so like I say, fairly comfortable today. I think they seem very happy, everybody at Mercedes, with that, and it's good. It bodes well probably for next season if you're only really interested in the fight, or you're only really interested in the fight for the win or the championship fight, then it looks a little bit better for next year. But Red Bull will still be the big favourites, of course. Already talking about next season, that's terrible, isn't it? Really, I shouldn't be doing that. But George Russell, P3 today. A bit of controversy in chat. Some people quite angry about this. Dell in particular feels that he gained positions cutting turn 1. Watch the analysis from Ant Davidson. It's three wide with somebody in Piastri into turn 1. Russell then bails out. There was the theory, or some people talking about maybe Piastri, he wasn't past Piastri till he cut the corner, but actually Ant Davidson says on his analysis that he does look to be marginally ahead of Piastri when he goes off track, at which point that'll be why the stewards haven't given him any kind of penalty there, because if he's ahead of the car, then they'll give him that. But it does make you wonder. I mean, he doesn't want to crash into turn 1, but you bail out like that and you've got such a good run off that turn 2 then, haven't you, around turn 3? Has that helped him then into turn 4? Has he got a better run off that corner because he's gone into that escape road? And I think Naomi Schiff and Nico Rosberg made the point on Sky afterwards that needs to be more of a penalty for running off track. You need to make that longer, or almost like a joker lap that you see in is it MotoGP do that, where you get a penalty, you've got to go a super long way around a corner. They need to make it a bit more like that for cars if they're going off, because otherwise it's just an incentive to run wide. Of course he wants to avoid contact. We don't want to see drivers out in turn 1, but I can't help but feel, even if he's ahead of Piastri, has that, I mean, what do you think, Freddie? Has that given him a better slingshot onto turn 3 and up to turn 4 that's helped him then pass, I think he passed one of the Haas's into turn 4?
I'm pretty sure there used to be a bollard there. So I think we had a whole controversy with
rejoining to the left of the bollard. Yeah, I think it's still there though.
Not coming. Okay, so I think there used to be. I do think it used to be a bit further along. Maybe it is just a bit simpler, a bit tighter. I don't know if they brought the gravel trap forward a bit as well. That might have changed it, but it did feel a bit sort of get out of jail free for him. That I think it was the right decision to bail out, but you can bail out by not letting on the throttle and accelerating across a tarmac runoff. So yeah. it's sort of, I don't know, it's much of a muchness, I guess, because it did just keep everything cleanly in the same place. It did neutralize it a bit, but it's not a punishment then. It just keeps it at the same. And I don't know. Yeah, I think probably it did. I don't know if it really gave him the cleaner run. The track was going to be pretty clean at that point. It's not going to be covered in marbles, and there's 2 cars around there. If you're going on the wider line on the first lap, it is a bit better than if you do it on lap 50. But I think probably lift off a little bit more obviously. It's a really hard thing to police that, and I don't think it would have justified a penalty, but I do think he was being opportunistic. So, but I don't think he did it to too much of an extent. I think that's my political correct way of saying it. I'm trying to be really delicate.
Clansom says to compare it to Monza at turn 1. If you look at you've got to go round those polystyrene bollards, haven't you? Almost like you're still taking the chicane, and maybe they need something like that. But then you've got to be careful what you're sticking on the track if cars are flying off there, haven't you? But Piastri, just to confirm, Piastri was right on the inside. Then there was another car, and then it was George Russell on the outside. So Piastri's not shoved Russell off track or anything like that. It was Russell's decision. From what I've seen of the onboards, it was Russell's decision to bail out, which turn 1, lap 1 of a race like Spain, you're going to take that opportunity if you have to. It's the right thing to do. Yeah. It's just as long as he doesn't pass. I think people are making out like he overtook 7 or 8 cars. I mean, he got a great start, but he was cruising past cars before that. incident, and then he's ahead of Piastri, then goes across. The stewards have looked at it, they've not given a penalty. They've obviously got more information than we have. We've got a few angles and Ant Davidson at the Skypad. That's what we've got. So, I'll give him I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there, but I don't like seeing. I worry about people coming off corners like that and gaining an advantage. We don't want that. It's got to actually penalise you because
them, don't you?
Yeah, because if there's a gravel trap there, then you're not rejoining in front of anybody. You're right to the back of the pack, so it needs to be more of a penalty. Is what I would say. Yeah,
I think so. You have the turn 5 at Abu Dhabi. That one can be a bit. I think that's the one Alonso straight line for fun a few years ago.
Yeah, he was kind of done with F1 at that point, wasn't he? It was like everyone's going, "Wow, where's this speed been all race?" It's like, oh, he cut about 16 corners.
Past his middle sector. Oh, but it's that kind of thing. Like you can, it's sort of the stewards sort of see a lift-off trace and think, "Oh, okay, the mini sector would be this long, and it's been longer, perhaps." Things like that. I don't really know how they do it. It can be a bit sort of just they see a few things that you can use common sense with. I would suggest, and that's what we were saying as well. That it's just okay. Yeah, he put the bail out. He took arguably a grown-up decision, which to not steamroller into the pinch point with 3 cars, where when it was just 2 with Hamilton and Lando, there was damage. And in the F3 race, there was a couple of cars came together there and spun out in the middle of the race. So it's one of those corners where caution is the phrase something like caution is the better part of valor. Discretion is the better part of valor. That's the one, yeah. That's what it is. Yes.
Are you, just on the Hamilton thing, are you surprised that he didn't get a puncture from the Norris thing? I thought because he seemed quite slow coming through 3, and I thought that he's got a puncture, and then obviously picked up the pace and was okay. I thought that was puncture for sure, but just a couple of overtakes that were nice.
Even more so, when they showed Norris's onboard of it, and so much of the front wing came off and sort of flew into his suspension. Essentially, I thought, oh wow, that's actually a big old chunk of front wing that's hit that tire, but. It's maybe it just hit the side wall of the tyre in a pretty strong way, but because Hamilton got a puncture last year in the first lap at Spain when he came together with K-Mac, so I guess it was quite lucky.
Yeah, Curious says that the tyre pressure increased this weekend, so very lucky not to end up with a puncture for Hamilton. So I was just going to say there were a couple of nice overtakes from the Mercedes drivers today. Stroll, turn 1, lap 8 for Hamilton. Also a good overtake on Sainz, turn 1, lap 28. That was quite a fun move. George Russell, what else did he get? So he had a nice move, lap 11 for P5 on Ocon at turn 1. That was the inside though. Really nice late braking move, quite an aggressive one, which worked out nicely. Really good move on Sainz as well into turn 1, lap 36 for P3. Everything pretty smooth though for Mercedes overall. A little bit of contact, like I say, and that runoff from George. Obviously not perfect, but I'm not going to criticise Lewis Hamilton for Lando Norris not braking, and I'm not going to criticise George Russell if he's not gained anything from that. I don't know if he has. I'd love to see the mini sectors and that from that, so I might have a look afterwards. But the only other thing really for Mercedes, we've talked about their step forward, but rain at turn 5 on lap 27, it turned out to be sweat from the inside of his helmet, and he was saying that every time he brakes, the sweat from his hair, which was under his balaclava or outside of his balaclava, was splashing on his visor. So George Russell had us all excited for a moment with a bit of rain, and it just turned out it was a bit sweaty.
I sat up and thought, oh, is it actually going to rain? I really did not expect it to get anywhere close to rain. I obviously didn't. And then George just gives us that little comic interlude. I think he's going to slick his hair back in Canada, I reckon.
He'll have to make sure it's in the balaclava. I like Christian Horner as well, sticking his hand out behind the pit wall like, no, George, there's no rain here, mate. Where are we up to? So we've done the top 2 teams. Third team of the day was Ferrari. What do you say? Just the race pace wasn't what I expected. I thought Sainz did well yesterday. Leclerc had a shocker of a weekend. I feel like Sainz did just about all he could into turn 1 outside of Verstappen, made it as difficult as possible. That's kind of what you've got to do. Was squeezed out. It was a fair move. Squeezed out on lap 1, pitted for mediums on lap 16 after Hamilton cut the gap to about half a second, I think he got to within him, and that was the point where I thought that Ferrari were going to struggle to at least get P2 today, and then attention turned to trying to beat Checo, the best way to beat Checo, and it just didn't really work. He had a slowish stop His second stop was 3.1, if you can call that slow. But I suppose when you've got Red Bulls doing 2 and 2.2, that is quite slow. Not that they were really fighting them, but the radio message was find the best way to beat Checo. He was 9.8 seconds behind Checo in the end. So wasn't happening for Ferrari today. Shocking weekend for Charles Leclerc. Something up with that car in qualifying.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced, Freddie, they fixed that at all in the race. Whatever it was, they changed everything, but there was something not right there, because you'd have expected Leclerc to have come through much further than that and been close. Well, I mean, he was only 0.8 off a point, but you'd still expect him to be sort of top 8 at worst, surely, even from the pit lane in Spain with the pace in that car.
I don't know if there's a little crack in there that they haven't seen somewhere in a part that they've carried through that's like a tub or something. I would have expected there to be still problems today based on that, because like you say, it was just stuck. It was just a car that was stuck. And I appreciate the Alpines have got good straight line speed and things like that, and that's mostly the cars he was stuck around. But it didn't really just click at all for him on race day. And there was definitely loads of problems yesterday that just were so surprising to see for Leclerc, who I think is a fantastic qualifier. There's got to be something up for him in that position. For Sainz today as well, for the smallest part of a second, I thought you could have the lead coming out of turn 1 and 2, but then Verstappen just cut straight across the track in the defensive move that he's entitled to do, and put him in his place. And it was just the pace just happened, I guess. That's all it was for Carlos. He seems to have always been around there, but just not quite having any influence. I think it was very easy to forget about him today. And Leclerc, I really expected him to retire Leclerc. Actually, I didn't think they were going to be. I thought they would come up with some kind of, oh no, there's a thing, we need to pull you in, Charles, and save his grace. But I think there's got to be something wrong with that car. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an announcement before Canada that they've changed another thing and maybe put in a new sort of bit of power unit or something.
Yeah, we're not making excuses for him. We're not trying to be, oh, poor Charles, boo-hoo, let's make an excuse. It's just not fitting with what he can do and what we know he can do. You saw in qualifying 19th place, and that was on whatever was wrong with the car. That's still technically on pure pace, because that was the pace he could manage. So it's not like he got caught out by anything. The car was just not working for him, and I don't see how, with no testing and no practice, how he can go just changing the rear end of that car is going to necessarily fit, because then you've got setup and thing, and maybe it was a setup issue. I don't. It'll be interesting to see, like you say, Freddie, in the next few days what they say, but just not there. And I looked about halfway through the race, and I looked sort of towards the top end of the timing tower on the TV, expect to see Leclerc sort of top 8, and then he's still down to about 16th place. I'm thinking something's not right here. Something's not right. Again, not making excuses, but it just didn't feel right. Carlos Sainz, I think Sainz had a decent race. Good qualifying yesterday, of course, second on the grid. I agree with you. It's a good move from Max to defend. I did wonder if Sainz had got him, because Max might think, this just isn't worth it. My teammate, my main championship rival's sort of out of things at the minute. Let's just sit back and then cruise past him on the straight in 2 laps time or something like that. But he stayed in there and got that done. Sainz was on the outside as well, which was bold, but we saw that a lot today. So I think Sainz did all right today, but I think he'll be disappointed to go from, of course he'll be disappointed to be 5th from second on the grid, but Mercedes were really good today. They were the best of the rest, if you want to say that. If you want to assume it's Red Bull and then everybody else, they were best of everybody else. And then you've got Perez coming through into 4th. So 5th is maybe on pure pace about the best Ferrari could have hoped for today. So I think that's fair on Sainz. Aston Martin as well. What was up with them today, Freddie? I can't work that one out at all. Stroll 6th, Alonso 7th. Stroll gained 2 places on lap 1, partly because of Norris issue, and then overtook Hamilton and then lost that position anyway. But Alonso, the pace wasn't there in qualifying. Then the pace came back on. I think he was on the soft tyres, seemed to enjoy them quite a lot. Closed the gap to Lance Stroll, ever the team player at the moment, Fernando Alonso, saying, tell Lance not to worry. I'm just going to close up to him and build a gap to those behind and cover the cars behind in case we get rain or anything like that. So I think I think he said in his interview afterwards that 6th and 7th is the same for the team, whoever finishes where. So that's he's very much about the team this season rather than pushing for that drivers' championship, because that's just not realistic, is it, at this stage? So what have you made of Aston Martin's pace the whole weekend? I mean, Lance Stroll did qualify top 5, so they had some pace there over one lap, but the race pace just wasn't there. I wondered if they were trying to push for a one stop, but the pace just didn't exist on Sunday today. Which is Sunday.
No, I
Sunday today.
I thought it might be a one stop. Yeah, I thought it might be a one stop as well. But I think, yeah, obviously Alonso broke a floor yesterday, and that meant, but he still got into Q3, and there was still underlying pace there, and Lance had a good qualifying and a good start. So I did think it's a bit strange to see just the way the race progressed for them. I don't have any answers to it other than just, I don't know, the setup and the car was just a bit better for Mercedes this weekend. I think they've obviously, Hamilton beat Aston Martin in Australia to second, but they were nip and tuck throughout the whole race and couldn't make mistakes and were within a second and a half. But it was just Mercedes, I think, did better rather than Aston Martin falling too far back, I guess. But they're still a minute behind. They've been about 30 seconds behind the Red Bulls. So it's got to be an anomaly rather than a new rule for the season, in my opinion, because of the gap being so big to Red Bull in comparison to the previous 5 races or so. I reckon there could be something just because Alonso wasn't leading the charge that makes it look a bit worse. Not to, obviously Alonso's a better driver than Lance Stroll, but because Alonso's then coming through the field rather than starting higher up, as he has done in a few of the races, second in Saudi, second in Miami, and so on. I don't know if that comes into it as well, and with no closing of the field as well. So maybe it was just didn't quite look as good as it could do, just due to the poor qualifying mistake from Alonso in Q1. We'll have to see, I guess. I wouldn't be surprised if they're back on form in Canada.
Yeah, with an update coming as well might help them too. So yeah, that's the sort of thing what you're getting at as well. I'm just looking at the timing screen. Lance Stroll went from 5th down to 6th. Alonso went from 8th up to 7th. So probably with Leclerc out of the way, with his issues, 6th and 7th was just the best they could do today, because they're nowhere near sight. Stroll's 17 seconds off him, and Alonso's only 8/10 behind Stroll, and they're sort of 5 seconds up the road from Ocon. So I think it's probably maximum they could have got today. But it could just be Mercedes have taken a step forward. Aston are waiting for this update to come for them, and then maybe that will close that gap back up or put them back ahead of them. Or it could even be one of those things that it's just track specific. Maybe it's just not a track that suits Aston Martin. But then I think Spain is one of those tracks where it's believed that if you're good in Spain, you should be good pretty much everywhere. So maybe it's not that for Aston.
Mercedes were good at Spain last year.
Yeah,
Russell
that's true.
was good at Spain last year. I kind of find it's an interesting one. You're right. It is the testing track. It's the form book. So maybe just the underlying pace and the job that Aston Martin has been doing has been a lot better just at other races. They've been doing a really good, clean, solid job with it, and they're extracting the most. Maybe the core route to the core values of the car are still a touch lacking. I mean, which would be fair enough considering they only switched to this concept pretty much exactly a year ago at Spain last year. So it would be fair enough if they're just whether complexities are heightened in the performance as they would be at Spain when you've got your clear form book of Red Bull at the front, Williams at the back, and we've seen those pictures on Twitter of the Red Bull and Williams flaws and the complete difference of complexity there. Maybe it's just the job they're doing is flattering the complexity of the car, but is allowing them to, they're still obviously the 4th fastest car there. So I guess, there's scope for them to move forward in that regard as well.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm going to make a point that means it doesn't mean anything, this next point. It really isn't important, but I just want to say, with their new side pods, that Mercedes is so much more aesthetically pleasing.
Oh, yes.
Than whatever that other thing was. I don't know, it really makes no difference to anything.
It used to look like a fridge.
It did. It just looks I quite like the look of it now. But yeah, that doesn't mean anything on performance. we'll start rolling through the rest of the field. Try and get through them a bit quicker. Then, if we've missed anything you want us to mention or talk about, we can do that with some questions later. Again, I always say they are a bit reviewy, but it's a reaction, not a review. So if you've got any questions, chat, hold them for later, and we'll come to them. And if we've missed anything, you can point out and go, "Oi, idiots, you forgot this," and then we can answer that for you. Then, so be nice though. Also, Valentine says, and he's done the work for me, so I'll read it like a script. People, don't forget to like the stream, and there are options to support the F1 Word via super chat donations or becoming a member. There you go. Thank you very much. And Patreon as well. Oh, he's written the script for me. Thank you, Valentine. Yes, you can support the channel with all of those things. Obviously, super chats get priority in chat, but I'll always come to you guys throughout. But please do drop a like and don't forget to subscribe as well if you are new. Lots to come for the rest of this season. Reactions for every race, of course, previews, and some other bits in between. And yeah, hopefully some other stuff as well, not just those. I promise. I'll try and do something. But anyway, where are we up to? Alpine, I guess. Yeah, Alpine. Esteban Ocon, 8th. Gasly, 10th. Good weekend for them. Again, could have been better, maybe, potentially, for Gasly with that 6th place penalty after qualifying, which is completely fair, by the way. Total slam dunk for both of them. Ended up down in 10th place. Did qualify higher than that, I think. Well, 4th then, wouldn't it? Yeah, 4th place. So, really good qualifying. Alpine seems to have taken a step forward, but I'm also not convinced, Freddie, that they're as bad as some people have made out this season. People talking about how, including Lauren Rossi, they're a long way off, but actually, although they don't want to be top of the midfield, if you want to call it the midfield, they want to be higher than that. You know, they were very strong in Jeddah. They were best of the rest in Miami. They were strong in Monaco. They were strong again this weekend. I don't think they've been that bad. I think that's somebody expecting a bit too much, perhaps, from his team. But hey, if I was the boss of Alpine, I'd want, with the money that's put into it, with the Alpine brand and the Renault behind it, I'd want to see more. But, you know, I just think they've been all right. But really good weekend. Ocon impressing me. There was one moment, late defence on Alonso, which Alonso said was fine. Ocon said was fine. So I'm not going to worry too much about it. It did seem quite late, but maybe it's another one of those moments from Esteban Ocon that was up to the line and not over it. And, of course, up to the line is absolutely fine. He can push it to that point, but no further. If Alonso's fine with it, I'm pretty sure he said if he wasn't. He did when they were teammates, so I'm sure he'll be fine in separate teams. And he had a slow pit stop as well. 3.9 seconds, slow right front, which 5.1 seconds off Alonso in the end. Probably wouldn't have done anything, but he was only 2.6 clear of Zhou. So Alfa Romeo has some good pace today. We'll talk about them in a bit. But I think overall, for the back-to-back races, Freddie, pretty damn decent for Alpine. I think if you'd have offered them a podium and then double points, including the podium in Monaco, then double points again in Spain, they'd have been absolutely delighted with that. They're looking good for P5. Early days, of course, but they've certainly got a gap to McLaren. Let's put it that way. Sorry, McLaren
start
fans.
To the European season is treating them well. Oh yeah, they definitely have the gap to McLaren, unfortunately. But I think on the Ocon move, I think you're right. It's up to the line. I think to do much more because there is grass there and another car. Other than that, I think most part fine. I think it could have been better with Gasly, deserved the penalties, but I wouldn't have been surprised if he had started from 4th, if he had finished at least split or ahead of the Aston Martins, because it would have just mixed up around up there. But of course, that's getting way too hypothetical with how races go when cars are in different positions. But anyway. But their pace is good. The car is good. Ocon obviously was on a mad one last week, but they both finished in the points today, like you say. So it's worked for them. They're doing all right. They're getting the points. They're getting on the board. They're keeping the gap to McLaren. They're not going to be near Ferrari. They're not going to be near Mercedes and Aston Martin. But if they can have a really good, solid 5th place, it's a full back from last year. But if you've got the below covered, if you're in the top half of the table, then you can sort of start to think, and they should really be aiming to do a similar thing to Aston Martin and maybe going for a big old jump. But they can do that if they keep close enough, in my opinion. And they are keeping close enough. There is pace in that car that they are able to extract. That's just the base level for the Alpine, since these new regulations, all through last year as well, the base level of the car has been very good. And there's room for them to build on that. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do have quite a few actually decent races in the latter half of this year. But I don't know if that's a bold prediction or not, just to say that. But, it's a good midfield team, and they're doing well.
A
Keep it
couple of,
up. Go on. Yeah.
yeah. A couple of people in chat not happy with the Ocon move. They feel that it should have been looked at. I'm just having a look again at some stills of it and the incident itself. On reflection, I am quite surprised the stewards haven't at least had a look at that, because it is, whilst he has been pushed into pit, sort of pit exit, which is part of the track, you are allowed to go in there. He has still given him a good. There's one still that makes it look like there's just a car's width and it's no more than a car's width, and there's another one that makes it look like there's not a car's width. So it's probably going to come down to angles and things like that. But if the stewards haven't looked at it, and Fernando Alonso, who is more than happy to kick off about Esteban Ocon as a teammate, hasn't said anything and he's fine with it, then I'm, with all due respect, I'll take Alonso's word for it over people who are a bit pissy with Ocon, which I can understand because it is quite a late move, to be fair. But it's not. I'd be surprised if. Yeah. I don't know, Fred. I was just looking at it again on the replay.
It didn't go that far.
No.
I don't know.
There is.
I'm going to try and find the replay.
There is space, but it is a car's width, which is all you have to leave. I think Martin Brundle says he always thinks it should be a car's width and then a little bit more. But it is a car's width, and that is all there is. But it is late. But Alonso's not. Tricky, actually.
It's quite a swoop. It's quite a swoop.
He does swerve,
round.
doesn't he?
Yeah, and.
But Alonso also takes quite a wide line round him, which I guess is evasive action as well, isn't it? So that's maybe makes that look a little bit worse, perhaps, because he's swung around like that. Ocon does come back left as well.
Yeah, Ocon comes back left, back onto the racing
line.
Alonso
slightly.
Moves first. Yeah.
I just sort of.
It's a really difficult one.
This, I sometimes wish we could show footage in the streams, because I just show it now, but it's have a look on Twitter or wherever you get your replays from. It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? One of those. I'm surprised it wasn't looked at, but I'm not totally surprised it wasn't a penalty, because, or I don't think they would have given a penalty.
The onboard looks a lot better from Alonso's perspective. The onboard looks like you can see the sort of flirtations with a defensive move, and then there's the jump from Ocon. The offboard does make it look worse than the onboard, which is usually the other way around, I would say. But
Ocon does look to move after Alonso's made the move. Yes, he does. Or at exactly the same time. It's one of those, isn't it? It's very close. But as he comes across, Alonso then gets sort of close to the rear wheel with his front wing. But then Ocon starts to move left again, and Alonso swings quite wide right. So I think that the offboard, like you say, certainly looks worse than the onboard. But I'm surprised the stewards didn't look at it. But I wouldn't give a penalty for that again, because what would have happened is they'd have looked at it after the race, and then Alonso would have said no, that's fine, and the stewards might have gone, oh well, if you're cool with that, then what does it matter? I mean, not in those words.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you make the decision for that.
More or less, yeah. It would be illegal in IndyCar. On road courses in IndyCar, it's illegal to do a blocked move. I'm pretty sure. Someone can correct me if they'll know better than me, but I think that would be penalised in other motorsport categories. So they're assigned as that, but in Formula One, in Formula E, in WEC, that move's fine, in my opinion. I'm going to make my bed and lie in it.
I'll stand by my looking at that replay on the onboard. The offboard, I was umming and ahhing, but when I saw the onboard, I'll stick with it was on the line. Any further, and it's a penalty, but I think that's just on the line. But I don't know. You don't want to see penalties for defence, but you have to be careful as well. But yeah, great weekend for Alpine. We'll not dwell on that too much. It's not cost anybody anything. Alonso still finished ahead. I'm sure if Alonso shoots into the back of him, it's a very different story. But I guess maybe that's an argument. Does a lesser driver or a less experienced driver, does he hit the back of Ocon, or I don't know. We could talk about that for ages, but we'll not get into it. Gasly, good move outside of Magnussen. Turn 1, I think. Was he the one? Yes, I think he made my overtake of the day, Pierre Gasly, around the outside of Nick De Vries at turn 1 on lap 24. Went nicely around the outside. Tiny bit of contact as well.
Yes.
De Vries just tagged it, but I think that was my move of the day, because that was about almost perfectly measured from Gasly. There was contact, more because De Vries was a bit understeery, but nothing, no, not suggesting a penalty or anything like that or investigation, but a little bit of contact. But I think that was my move of the day from Pierre Gasly out of everybody. I think there's some great moves today. Again, Russell on Sainz was a cracker, but yeah, I'm giving Gasly overtake of the day for that one. If that's
I think I'm going to go for a move from Hülkenberg. I think he came out pretty early in the race, around sort of lap 11 or 12 when they started to pit. I think he came out the pits and side through 2 cars into turn 1, and then basically came in sort of sidebar out with 1, then went past 1, and then got past another immediately. I can't remember who it was or anything because it was early in the race. It was hours ago. But I remember looking at that thinking, yeah, that's a proper good, nice move. Actually, fair play. He's had a good weekend, and I think it's a shame for Haas that he wasn't able to hold on higher up. But he had good pace.
Alfa
Not
Romeo.
moving on too far, but yeah.
Alfa Romeo, Zhou Guanyu, ninth place, couple of points. Would have been 10th, I believe, but Tsunoda got a penalty, 5-second penalty. We'll come to that in a bit, but Zhou up to ninth place, which promoted Gasly into the top 10 as well, by the way. So, yeah, good stuff from Alfa for Zhou. Bottas down in 19th place. What have I got in my notes? Zhou was involved in that fun scrap, wasn't it, with Hülkenberg and Tsunoda? We had sort of 3 cars very close together for quite a while. They enjoyed that stuff. And then I think I've just pointed out there, tried the overtake around the outside of Tsunoda on lap 56. Ran off at turn 1 and rejoined. He said he pushed me off. I would say he didn't push him off literally because there was no contact, but he didn't leave an awful lot of space. But stewards had a look at it and decided penalty for Tsunoda. We'll talk about the penalty when we get to Tsunoda, but that's what the stewards decided. But yeah, Zhou nice and racy today, so it was quite fun to watch him out there with that battle with Hülkenberg and Tsunoda. Bottas, kind of a weird day for Bottas, I've written, because he had a slow stop, 2 slow stops, 4.3 and 4 seconds, so lost probably about 4 seconds in total there in pit stops, which isn't great. But said on lap 38, he was told Albon and Magnussen behind, and he says, yes, I'll slow them down. So obviously trying what he can to help his teammate to the points, which is great. But Bottas, bit of a weird day, and I'd possibly argue bit of a weird season for Bottas. I was expecting, he started quite strong. I think it was good for Alfa last year. But what's he done this season? 4 points, same as Zhou. 1 point finish in 8th place. And then he's 18, 11, 18, 13, 11, and 19. It's been a bit of a weird season for Bottas. I'm not quite sure how to read it, and that's kind of how his race was for me as well.
I feel like Zhou has been the better Alfa Romeo driver this year, and this race was really good for him. He was scrapping around, like you say, and it was good fun to watch. I agree he wasn't pushed off, but he wasn't left a lot of room, but that was fine. I think he just did well. I think he deserves the points finish. I think Tsunoda deserves the points finish as he got the penalty, but Zhou, I also think was outperforming his teammate more. And yeah, Bottas, I think's pace limitations probably had to make him play the team game, the roadblock game, and that's the way you've got to use your second driver, I guess. If you're a team that's only going to get points with one car every now and again, you put all your eggs in that basket and bloody go for it. And I think, yeah, if they're saying to Bottas to hold people up, then do that. It's like in the start of the season, I think Alfa Romeo pitted for the fastest lap just to take it off, I think Alpine or someone.
Yeah, it was,
and got the fastest lap with low points for it. So it's that kind of mindset of, we're 2 cars here, let's use them for one goal. And I guess that's worked for them. I guess I don't know how much it would have been a factor, because I think Zhou's pace was very good. And at the end of the day, Williams and the Haas's were laps and Zhou wasn't. But he did a good job. He did a good race. And I think Bottas it's got to be just a familiarity with the car thing. He was talking about having no grip yesterday. And the other one that sort of stands out to me where he was way off was Australia. I think it's got to be just something's just not clicking. All I can imagine is just that's not what he needs.
Because he's not a bad driver, is he? It's not a talent thing.
He's not. It shouldn't be a talent thing. And he's not really been ever slow in any car he's driven. So, yeah, there's been like Hamilton. But Bottas wasn't ever slow.
No.
So it's weird. It's a really weird one. I hope he can sort it out.
I hope so too. We'll do AlphaTauri at the same time because that kind of brings in Tsunoda. Just De Vries, tiny bit of contact with Gasly, turn 1, lap 24. I've already talked about that one. Actually ended up 14th today. De Vries did out-qualify Tsunoda yesterday. So I think it was Will said after Monaco that it was De Vries' best weekend in F1 in Monaco, certainly this season at least with AlphaTauri. Not an awful one this weekend, obviously beaten by Tsunoda in the race, but not horrendous, just not great. The car's not fantastic, is it? I think Tsunoda's extracting pretty much everything from it, and De Vries isn't anywhere near that at the moment. But Tsunoda, again, was involved in that fight with Hülkenberg and Zhou. Really nice move around the outside of Zhou at turn 4 as part of that fight. And then a 5-second penalty for the incident with Zhou. see Zhou notes. We've already done that. So it seems a little harsh to me. 5-second penalty for that. There's no contact, and I know it doesn't have to be contact. There doesn't always have to be contact, but it feels a little bit harsh that's a penalty. I'm going to go and find it in a second. See if it was Tsunoda and Zhou, wasn't it? But I think it's one of those. You can't argue that he hasn't left the space, because he hasn't left the space, but he's not exactly shoved him off, has he? But then I suppose the next argument is that if Zhou doesn't take avoiding action, then it is contact. So I'm not sure. I'll have a look at it again. But what are your thoughts initially, Freddie?
It's not really one for me. I think Tsunoda was doing some pretty spirited driving and performing really well. Actually, I don't think the penalty was really there. I think if we're saying that Ocon's on the line and things like that, Tsunoda wasn't over the line or at the line in any way. So I think it's a bit overly penalisable, surely.
Zhou appears to bail out quite early. Looking at the replay now,
yeah,
I mean,
that's my thoughts.
Tsunoda's hits the apex, does understeer, but his wheels turned to the right, so he's not sort of turning towards him. And then Zhou does bail out quite quickly. Obviously, we're not.
Elle's saying it in the chat. If that's a penalty, then Max on Sainz is 1-2. And
that's a lap 1 thing, though. They tend to be more lenient, don't they, on lap 1? If on lap 2, maybe.
But even so, if you're the first car, then still, if you're 2 cars side by side, Max does cut across a lot more than Yuki ever got close to doing, in my opinion. So I don't think it's a penalty, and I don't think it should be a penalty in lap 1 either, is what I'm saying. But I don't think it then should be, at the same time, a penalty on lap 55, whatever it was. But
it was quite a way in, yeah.
yeah, I disagree with the penalty, although I like Zhou getting 2 points.
Yeah, it's good for Zhou. Not so much. But yeah, no, but I think
Tsunoda deserves them as well.
But Tsunoda definitely hits the apex. There's no doubt about that. He is understeering. Zhou then bails out really early, and then Tsunoda carries on to take the corner as normal, which he may not have done if Zhou had been there. It is a tricky one, but I can sort of see where the stewards are coming from with it, but I think that's really harsh, to be honest. And Carol says it in chat, neither was a penalty. Obviously referring to the size one. I don't think they were, and I think Freddie said the same. Neither was a penalty. But we've seen worse not given penalties in F1 in recent weeks and years. So it's quite weird that's. I don't know. If Yuki isn't turning right and he's sort of brought the wheel back to the left and he's starting to drift that way, and maybe if there's a bang of wheels, then I'd probably say yes, that's a penalty. But I think there's enough space there, and I think a bit like Russell on lap 1, Zhou makes a decision to bail out, sort of anticipating any kind of contact, and makes a decision to bail out rather than being shoved off. But nothing against Zhou. If you're a driver, you're fighting that over the radio, aren't you, for an opportunity for points? So I sort of understand that. Thank you to just changing my name for the super chat. Says Norris said in his post-race comments he thinks McLaren is the 8th, 9th fastest car. Do you agree? How would you all rank the cars in terms of pace? We'll do that a little bit later, mate. But thank you very much for your super chat. But yeah, I think penalty harsh. Just having a lot of people are saying in chat and see if they agree with us, Freddie. Second Synth says Yuki got shafted.
Yeah, he did. I think if Zhou hadn't bailed out, there would have been space. Yuki would have left the space into turn 2 anyway. So it just doesn't really.
That's kind of the point I was making. That yes, Tsunoda does come back to take his normal line around the corner, but that's because Zhou's no longer there. Zhou's taken the decision to bail, so I think that's harsh, and it's cost Yuki potentially points today. His pace wasn't great, was it, at that stage of the race anyway? He seemed to be struggling again, but he had a shot at points today, so that's taken it off him. And yeah, he
didn't fall back. He'd stayed in. I mean, I guess when the driver ahead's got a penalty, you're going to fight differently. But
yeah,
he stayed there. He stayed with Ocon, really. So I think his pace was where it needed to be at that stage in the race, with the holding on to it's the Alfa Romeo and the Alpine are master cars, and so is the Ferrari, but he was holding on legitimately, and I think it's a shame, actually, now, really, properly sort of talking about it. It's a shame, I think, that he got the penalty. as well as it's a really impactful penalty for that team now.
Purple Zebra says, feels like a case of the midfield being held to different standards to the front runners. I felt that for a while in F1. I've often said, in fact, I've said it
I agree.
on stream before, if with incidents where they don't give a penalty, then I say, if that's a Sargent and a De Vries, that's a penalty. But it's the same in I'm not saying it's okay, but it's a similar thing in football. Man United or City or Liverpool will get a penalty for something, but then Brighton won't get that because they're not considered one of the top 6 or whatever. It might not be that. It might just be me being silly with that in football and in Formula One, but I think sometimes you look at an incident and then it's not a penalty for, let's say, I don't know, Russell and Perez, but it is a penalty for De Vries and Albon, which just doesn't. I don't like that.
Yeah,
it's just how it feels sometimes. It might be nothing, but
I think you get it more in sort of Formula One to then say Formula 2.
Yeah,
you can get quite a few slam dunk things that, say, in Formula 2 you'll get a drive through, but in Formula 1 you'll get a 5-second penalty. I find that kind of thing a bit weird. But it's. I mean, I'm to bring up Gunter Steiner and him questioning the professionalism of the stewards. It's very fair enough to question it when decisions like that are made. And
I agree with his statement. Pretty much completely, Freddie.
I agree with his statements. Yeah, when he's then then the biggest thing that the stewards can do is tell off someone for having a go at them. It doesn't really bode well for them when they do decisions that are, I think, the majority of people watching here completely agree that a wrong decision. When they make that kind of decision, who knows, maybe they're bored, but it's still the wrong decision. You can investigate it and do it properly, but I don't understand how an investigation would have come to the conclusion it did.
Yeah, John Jones makes a fair point. He says, I'm not sure about that. Remember De Vries in Australia? That's fair, but that's an example. But
yes.
Like largely speaking is what I'm talking about, John, rather than specific. You're right. That should have been a penalty in Australia, by the way, just to let you know. Will Chen says, Andre Mariner is making calls with the FIA. John also says, I think they're just inconsistent. And again, they are. But for someone like, let's say, Gunter Steiner, probably should be talking about Haas now, but someone like Gunter Steiner, he's having to put up with his inconsistencies with his team, like the black and orange flag, for example, putting up with that every other weekend. It's frustrating. So he's sort of given his opinion there, and I tend to agree with him. I think the stewards should be better, and I think I've long said there should be professional stewards, if you like, at every race for consistency. The only thing against that is that then you might have one steward who is considered to have a bias against the driver who's there every week, and that causes a whole other problem. We'll get into that either later or another day. Let's roll on to McLaren. Oh dear. Fantastic one-lap pace. Absolutely fantastic one-lap pace. 3rd place for Lando Norris. Even ignoring Norris's contact at turn 1, just 0 race pace compared to what they had yesterday. Such a drop-off in pace. It looked yesterday like some upgrades had given them a boost, and they put in a fantastic lap. The conditions had gone their way as well. Everything was working nicely, and then it all fell apart on race day. Norris, 100% on him. That is not, Sainz slows. Hamilton slows to react to Sainz. Norris doesn't slow, hits the back of Hamilton. He's got nobody to blame but himself there. Just it's one of those first lap things. I'm not going to go hard on Norris for that. It's just something that can happen sometimes. He's got caught out by that, and that's cost him. And that was pretty much it. I'm just trying to have a look and see. Pitted end of lap 1 for hard tyres and a new front wing. And that was basically it. P17 in the end. And Piastri, who was running quite nicely in the points for a while, to be fair, ended up down in 13th place and fell away quite quickly. So just not what I expected after qualifying. I didn't, unless there was chaos, I wasn't expecting to see Norris on the podium, for example. But I thought he had a shot at being somewhere around, let's say, Ocon, for example, P8, somewhere in there. But the pace wasn't there today for one reason or another. And I'm frustrated. But it is, on the upside, it is the last time we have to see that livery. But on the downside, we do have to go back to the other livery. So can't win with McLaren.
When it's cold, they're great. Yesterday, it was really cold and slippery, and both cars were doing really well. When the wet conditions properly set in Monaco, both Norris and Piastri were they were brilliant. So it does just seem to be that in normal conditions, the car's not fast, but in strange, cold, anomalous conditions, which happen a handful of times throughout the season, then they can make it work. And it did just seem to be that even with the cloud cover and the potential of it being cold, that it was just not able to get anything to work for them. I think the car is just limited. It's it's something like that question you had earlier about where Norris ranks it as 8th, 9th fastest, and that's pretty much where I would rank it as well. And it's Norris did a fantastic job yesterday. Piastri did a fantastic job yesterday. I agree with you. Norris's fault lap 1, but again, these things happen, and then they just sort of. I guess it deals with being overtaken by everyone straight away. Just get it over and done with. But that's quite a sad way of looking at it.
Elian just making a point in chat says Russell and Hamilton with contact wasn't a penalty, but Zhou and Tsunoda with contact was. That's something I can't understand. I think with that one, I think if Hamilton gets a puncture, maybe they do look at that. But I think because Russell's done all the damage to himself, and not Russell, Norris done all the damage to himself, and the fact that it was just a first lap thing. It's not like he sent Hamilton into a spin or he's caused a massive accident. They've probably just waved that on. I don't think that's an inconsistency from the stewards as such. I just think maybe if that happens later in the race, like I say, and it causes more damage, they might look at it just to make sure Hamilton hasn't cut across or something, or if he gets a puncture, maybe they look at it, but they're never going to look at little flicks with the front wing like that on lap 1 unless it causes a bigger thing. I get the point, but I'm just having a look at the FIA. Sorry, Freddie, very quickly. The Mercedes have been summoned to see the stewards, but it's for an alleged breach of Article 12.2.1i of the International Sporting Code and non-compliance with the media delegates post-race procedures, document 40. It's a breach of Parc Fermé instructions. So I will have a look and see what that is in the International Sporting Code. I suspect that's not putting the car in the right place or not non-compliance with the media delegates post-race procedures, so maybe didn't go for the interview on time or something to do with the podium, maybe.
If it's media delegate, then yeah. If it's media delegate, then I'd imagine it's a fine. But because it's not anything, it doesn't. If it's media, then yeah, it's where they go, where they put it, where they park up.
Okay.
Things like that, I'd imagine.
Well, the full thing, sorry, is just the team representatives and the physiotherapists for cars 44 and 63 are required to report to the stewards in relation to the incident below. Alleged breach of the article of the Sporting Code, non-compliance with the media delegates post-race procedures. So it doesn't sound like it's an issue for the drivers as such. It sounds like, well, it's physiotherapists. So we've had this, did we have this recently with a physiotherapist? This is going to sound weird, but you know what I mean? Just touching a driver, or something similar where they shouldn't be doing that, and that's maybe what that's going to be.
Well, I suppose realistically, if you want to be absolute letter of the law, then they've got to be weighed before they can even go and celebrate anything. But that doesn't happen. So I think realistically, it's just going to it's
a slap on the wrist, and a fine kind of thing.
Just slap on the wrist. We'll talk about it today. Just don't be stupid. You don't need to put your watch on yet. That kind of thing.
Yeah. Conspiracy theorists will love it though.
Oh yeah.
Brace yourself, F1 Twitter.
Both Mercedes get thrown out because of a I don't know what, a hairband or something. I'm not sure.
I love that idea.
I remember what. Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton put an earring back in, and the FIA went mad. They ignore incidents on track. They're like, oh God, he's put his piercing back in. Disgraceful. I'm joking.
No, not the piercing.
I'm joking. Hamilton fans, don't destroy me. It's a physiotherapist thing. So the one and only says failure to follow the instructions of the relevant officials for the safe and orderly conduct of the event. So God knows what it is. But I'll keep an eye on it. I don't think, like Freddie says, probably a fine and a slap on the wrist. Not expecting anything else. But we'll get through this order, then we'll keep an eye on that before we end the stream, see what happens. Where are we up to? Haas. We've sort of done McLaren. I don't want to go. I've gone into them quite hard at times this season. So just not. Oh, Piastri, by the way, nice move outside of Hulkenberg at turn 1. You'd be surprised to hear. That was a good move. So, yeah, I think Piastri had a good weekend, actually. Honestly.
Yeah, he's settling in well.
I'd argue as well doing a better job up against Norris than Ricciardo was last year. So, I mean,
I wouldn't
Ricciardo
argue
really
against
struggled.
you. I agree with you.
Yeah, Ricciardo did really struggle last year. Piastri's sort of not. I wouldn't say hit. Well, you could say hit the ground running because he's actually done a solid job, but he's still being beaten by Norris, but not absolutely horrendously, I guess is what I'm getting at. So I think a lot of people thought he was going to struggle. I mean, points wise, Lando Norris has 12, Piastri has 5, so it's not that close in fighting for 1 or 2 points a race. But I think he's done all right as Piastri this year. Haas, rear jack issues for both cars, it appeared, at pit stops because both drivers had slow stops at 5 seconds apiece. So I don't know what was going on there. I'll have a look for their press release in a moment. We've talked about Hulkenberg's battle with Zhou and co. That rhymes, I like that. And I think you mentioned the move, didn't you, Freddie? The double move, the inside of Zhou down the straight, then the outside of Tsunoda at turn 1 as he was exiting the pits. So that's your move of the day. So good stuff from Hulkenberg. But
yes.
Haas race pace, not great. I'll throw Williams in as well because I've got nothing on them except for a slow stop for Sargent on lap 37 with 4 seconds. But Williams, I would say absolutely nowhere today on pace. Albon 16th, Sargent 20th. And race pace, again, not there for Haas. 15th for Hulkenberg, 18th for Magnussen. But a positive for Haas. Great qualifying from Hulkenberg again. I guess it's my
great
positive
qualifying
there.
from Hulkenberg.
Yeah, P7.
That's the positive. The positive is that it's your kind of classic Haas position, isn't it? They qualify well and then don't really do the best race and have pit stop issues. There's not really much more for me to add. I don't think they were there or thereabouts. I think for the majority of the race, but they did slip back as it went on. The pit stops didn't help them. I think with the slickest race operation, with the pit stops working, things like that, they probably could have been dicing around maybe where Piastri and Leclerc and people like that were at the end, perhaps, but it would have been a push and they sort of just fell into the natural order. With Williams, talking about them, I think, they were. It goes back to our conversation on Aston Martin about maybe just the complexities of the car being overly exaggerated and the simplicity of the Williams really putting it as the backmarker car for this year. And, being able to mix it with Albon a bit, but not much. It's just, the strengths of the track weren't working. The strengths of Williams' car did not suit this track.
Gunther Steiner said for Haas, quite a disappointing result today. We just couldn't get the tyres to stay alive. We did one more pit stop than everyone else, but even if we hadn't stopped, we would have gone slower and ended up there anyway. I love how to the point he is. I do like that. Kevin Magnussen, says it was a tough day in terms of tyre management. Competitive compared to everyone where we were fighting, but our tyres just fell off quickly. And Nico Hulkenberg says the degradation was really high for us and we had 3 stops, whereas the competition didn't. Yeah. So it was a tyre thing. At first glance, it looks at first glance that over one lap, there we go, we're competitive, but in the long runs, we still have some homework to do. So yeah, we said about the 1 lap pace. So good over 1 lap, not great in the race, tyre management issues. I will say as well, Piastri was P9 in qualifying, so I think even though Norris was third, I still think that was solid from him. Alex Albon, in the press release from Williams, says the race wasn't easy, but it was better than I thought it would be. We were fighting and beat 3 cars on merit. Norris, I don't know if Norris was on merit as such, but I'll give you that. I'll let you have that. He might have fallen back there, Norris, we'll see. But Magnussen and Bottas, fair enough. I thought better than I thought it would be was quite surprising. Considering where we were on Friday and Saturday, I'm pleasantly surprised in how today went. You get no prizes for P16, obviously. Some rain could have maybe helped, and Logan Sargent says starting in the pit lane didn't cost us too much as we caught the back of the pack pretty quickly. First 2 stints were pretty good, which was positive, but the last stint was tricky. We need to understand why it changed from stint to stint, as I couldn't find the pace or grip. All the press releases are coming in now all at once. They always do this. Tsunoda's super disappointed and frustrated, says the penalty was harsh, but it's something I have to accept. There was little space, but still I thought it was enough. I tend to agree. There was little space, thought it was enough. On a positive side, the team did a fantastic job to improve the brake issues, so that's good news. And to be in the fight for points this weekend. And De Vries says, obviously as a team we wanted more, although I had a good start. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and we got stuck on the inside. So we lost too many places and then got stuck behind other cars. DRS trains in Formula One, that's the thing, isn't it? Nothing much there from De Vries other than that. It's just having a quick skim through. Competitive on the medium compound, which is good. Yeah, they felt competitive from the start, AlphaTauri, but it's just not really translated on Sunday for one reason or another. Canada will be a different type of track, but I'm confident we can build on our improvements and capitalise on every opportunity. So yeah, just a few quotes there from those that we tend to fly through at the end, but I've got nothing else. Unless there's anything you want to add, Freddie, before we do drive of the day and then come to chat.
Nothing for me now. We've summed it up pretty well.
Awesome stuff. So, driver of the day, let me know in chat who you're going for. Lewis Hamilton won the official driver of the day. Must have been a close one, though, because I think Perez was leading it with a few laps to go, so it was quite close. Who have you got for your driver of the day, Freddie? Some good ones today, actually, I think.
Is it boring to say Max? I feel like the winner never normally gets driver of the day, so maybe it's not boring to say Max, but he was so good. And yeah, pole, fastest lap, the win. Brilliant stuff, I think, to be honest. I think I've got to say Verstappen. Even though I agree Lewis did a really good job. He did do a really tidy, clean race. No mistakes, good overtakes, good pace. But, I think he loses essentially 0.5 of a mark getting overtaken by Stroll, I guess. So I guess that's why I'm give it to Max.
Yeah, I think your top two are the standouts, aren't they? Grand Slam for Verstappen, Hamilton, P2, pretty comfortable P2 as well. So I think they're your standouts. Just having a quick look through the field.
See, Joe is a good shout.
Yeah, you could say Perez because he's come through the field, and Russell, but neither of them had the perfect day, did they really? Perez, I feel, could have come through quicker for what, but obviously couldn't for one reason or another. It didn't work out for him that way. So it's sort of, it is difficult to pick. I think it is between the top two. So if you're going Verstappen and the public went Hamilton, I'll say Norris. No, I won't go with Norris. No, I think Verstappen would have been my pick because it is the Grand Slam and it was basically faultless apart from the black and white flag. But I'll go Hamilton then. Seeing as you pick Verstappen, I think I'm just trying to look through.
I think I'm agreeing with a lot of the chat and saying Joe is a good person to include as well.
He kept it interesting back there as well, didn't he? In that little gaggle of cars he was in.
Yes, exactly.
So
there's now a little. He has outperformed a very good driver.
Yeah.
Comprehensively in this race. To be fair, I think. Would you say that was the biggest? Because sort of probably biggest teammate disparity would be Verstappen to Perez and then Joe to Bottas. I think you could say.
Alonso to Stroll.
I guess across the season, but this weekend, Stroll.
This weekend, yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yes. No, sorry, yeah.
No.
This weekend, not to make it driver of the weekend, but I think I think Joe and Verstappen and Hamilton, all three. I think they're my top three drivers of the weekend. There we go. I've butchered the format and given you three people instead.
That's fine. just name all 20 and then you've covered your backside for him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say actually just on Stroll very quickly. He has ensured this weekend that he won't be Van Dorned. Oh, it hurts me to say that. He won't be Van Dorned, so he's the worst is going to be 21-1. So that's something for you. There you go. But let's read some of your picks out. Clansom says Hamilton. Dell's gone with Norris. John says Yuki. Waldo says Hamilton. RRTV says Joe. Aswin says Yuki. Michael says Hulkenberg. Random Bosman says Lewis or Max. I think Lewis or Max are the pick, really, for me. I would have got, if I was voting, I'd have gone with Verstappen, I think, just because it was so almost perfect. Obviously, I hate the fact I'm calling it almost perfect because he got a black and white flag for track limits, but that is technically how it works, I suppose. But
you can afford to where he is, can't he?
Exactly, yeah. He's put himself in that position. He can do that, can't he? So, but Grand Slam is always, I always find that impressive in Formula One. So, yes. What will we get to? So Dory says Verstappen, KMS Boss says Hamilton, fill in the blank says Max Grand Slam, CPB1 says Max, Yuki and Checo, my driver of the day, says Will, Valentine says Max, Russell for RC Parker, Nick Surface says Russell, even though he deserved a 5-second penalty. Nick's adamant on that one, fair enough. The one and only says Max Verstappen, topped FP 1, 2, 3, pole win, fastest lap, and led every lap, all with comfortable distance to anyone else. I think Hamilton led FP1, didn't he?
Yeah, Q1.
We have to check it. Was it Q1 Hamilton?
I think so. Yeah,
I think FP1 results.
FP1 was Max by about 7/10.
Of course it was. Yeah, it was FP1 Max, FP2. Oh, he's right. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm questioning you, the one and only. I should have known that from your name that you are the one and only. I should have known that. Yes. So I knew he hadn't topped every single session exactly. But I thought it was FP1. But yeah, thank you, Freddie. You've saved me on that one.
Joe, that would make it the Grand Chelem, wouldn't it, if he did?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that. He led every lap. And Well, it depends if you do Q1, Q2, Q3 is 3 sessions, which I guess you have to. Or otherwise, it's
Sorry, Freddie, just I keep
no,
interrupting
no,
you.
no.
Let
Go
me
on, I'm
to.
rambling. Yeah.
Annette says Joe, the Piastri for driver of the weekend. Ayinka says Hamilton. Clansom says Lewis never got driver of the day. Back in the day, he didn't, did it? It was always the joke was it was always
No.
Verstappen. Adonis says Joe looked great. Also Yuki and Perez. Let's pick three more. Pascal says Joe. Random R fella says Hamilton, and one more Russell for Fanta Boy 15. So yeah, if you've got any questions, pop them in chat, and we'll answer a few before we wrap up for tonight. I'll try not to run to 2 hours because Freddie might have a life, unlike me.
might have a life.
He might have a life. I don't know for sure. He will
confirm it yet. We'll find out.
We'll find out when he disappears in 5 minutes. He's off out.
Yeah.
Gotta go. Sorry. Bye. Yes, if you've got any questions, pop it in chat. Don't forget to subscribe as well. Drop a like. 137 likes so far. 482 watching. We were a little bit higher than that, so let's try and get those likes up just a little bit. And then if we can get to 200, I'd be pretty happy with that. I know they don't really matter, but it's nice. It's nice to know somebody likes me. That sounded really pathetic and desperate. And I was only joking as well, but yeah, please love me. Oh dear.
I also appreciate the likes on Sean's channel.
There you go. Yes. And don't forget to check out Freddie's links in the description as well. Definitely. Will F1 ever ditch the budget cap, says Nick Surface. Question. Look, I said it on Wednesday and I didn't go into it. I have quite a controversial opinion. I understand why we have it, and I know they want to try and make sure the sport's sustainable. But to me, cost cap, handicapping successful teams, which is what a lot of people want to see, spec series, that's not Formula One to me. If they got rid of the cost cap, I get it. I know why it's there, and I understand that they've got to be careful with the long-term future of the sport, and they don't want to make it too expensive for new teams coming in. They want to make it attractive to manufacturers. I totally understand all that, but I'm not a big fan of the cost cap. Also, what it's doing is, once upon a time, Mercedes could just say, right, we've built a shitbox. Let's go and build a brand new car. We've got the money to do it. Throw money at it, and then close that gap to Red Bull a bit more quickly. They can't now. They've got to be more careful because of CFD restrictions, cost cap restrictions. It kind of almost, if one team, as we've seen this year, gets it right in the regulations and they disappear, it's going to be harder for everyone to close up than it would have been 10 years ago because you can't just throw cash at it. That said, Mercedes were dominating nearly 10 years ago, 2014. We're not far off that. And it took a while for anyone to get anywhere near them, didn't it? So maybe it's not terrible. Like I say, Freddie, I get why it's there, but I'm just not a fan of the cost cap.
I've always been okay with it, actually, because I've always sort of thought that the lack of a cost cap, it is one of the reasons why competition can be a bit difficult. Admittedly, Red Bull have completely disproving that, but it's kind of, I think it does work in the long run. I think the only thing I could see that would mean a cost cap would be completely abandoned, perhaps, would be, without getting too real world, but inflation and things like that being completely ridiculous over the past year. And they did make allowances to that for the cost cap for this year, which is the right thing to do. But it just gives me the impression that come 5 years' time, it would just be, oh, we've had to give this allowance, this allowance, this allowance. We may as well just not bother with the financial regulations anymore, in the same way they just gave up with trying to police team orders. I know that's a wild comparison, but it's, for me, I guess it's that kind of thing. I quite like the sort of closest thing to a level playing field that you can get in F1, apart from the same tyres, being a cost cap and seeing where teams can go with that. But it's really weird because, yeah, I appreciate, when a team does well, they do well. I'm not saying curb the team that does well. I'm not saying change the regulations for a car. I'm just saying, for an equal opportunity at the start of a position, say, it's very idealistic, a cost cap, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally get why people like it. It's just, I think I think the biggest issue for me with the cost cap, and I know I've said this a lot, is what happened last year. We can't be messing about with it in October when a championship's already been decided. It needs to be wrapped up sooner. If you need to police it properly, but you need to police it quickly as well, which isn't easy. I know doing something thoroughly and quickly are not always going to go hand in hand, but we can't. It can't take as long as it did to sort that mess out. That was ridiculous. But I don't know. Yeah. I don't want the sport to collapse and teams to fall off the grid because they can't afford to be there, or manufacturers to turn their nose up because it's too expensive. But I just think
teams are now turning a profit. That's one of the cool things about it. And again, it corresponds well with obviously the boom of Formula One in the past few years, sort of through COVID as well. But Haas, I think, has been very open about the fact that just before the cost cap in 2020, they could have completely fallen off through COVID, but they needed the support and things like that because they weren't able to throw the money in the way they needed to be a competitive team and to exist and things like that. But now that teams have got, from a financial company perspective, which is, capitalism, but anyway, it's...
That's a whole other debate for a whole other stream.
Oh, goodness me, I know. But you've got the kind of perspective that I'm running around in circles now in my head, but you've got, if there's this is the expenditure, that's it, that's cool, and there's more value to sponsorship in a way that you can, I'm trying to phrase this, it works in my head, but that they can latch onto the peak of F1 more, and then it's not just a money pit, it's a place to have value and to create money, which for a team like Williams, say, which has got a capital investment firm owning it, they can come into Formula One, they can get a team, they can change it around, shake it up a bit, make it better, and turn a profit, and you'll then get good long-term investment in independent teams in Formula One, which I think is a good thing. Am I making sense with that?
I think so. It's I guess it's good to see teams surviving comfortably as well. It's something that
exactly.
I sort of,
as opposed to sort of teams like Manor and all of that falling off the grid.
Yeah, look, I'm not quite to the Bernie extreme where he says if you haven't got the money, don't spend it. I'm not quite to that extreme with it, but I do think maybe. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the cost cap. It's something that will warm to me when it because I think it's the people talk about the cost cap working as and maybe it's a combination of both, but I think it's more the CFD that's worked than the cost cap in terms of closing the field up, because that's really what helped Aston Martin. Yes, they've got the budget, but where could they be if they're allowed to spend what the hell they want? Bearing in mind they've got the money behind them now and the leap they've made this for. But I think it's this season, but I think it's the CFD, the restrictions there, the scaling there that has helped Aston Martin, for example, this season, rather than the cost cap. I think the cost cap will play its part, but I think if you remove the cost cap and you kept the CFD restrictions, Aston Martin still make a big jump, for example, just on the field spread argument. But I don't know. I've just never, I've never been comfortable with the cost cap. I don't know why, because look, I completely agree. It got crazy. It got absolutely crazy with the money they were spending. I mean, once upon a time they were, and we're going back a while now, once upon a time they were putting a brand new engine in everybody's session. I know that changed with the restrictions on the engines and your usage for a season, but the money spent was crazy, and I understand it had to be reined in, but I just think, I quite like the CFD scaling, but I sort of think if Red Bull, for example, or Mercedes make a crap ton of money, they should be allowed to spend that because they've earned that money. But I also understand that from a sporting point of view, you want, as you said, Freddie, everyone on as level a playing field as possible, because I guess my worry is if we didn't have a cost cap,
for example, how they then can make the money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
to be involved in Formula One, I guess every argument has a good rebuttal, and I think for me, if the CFD sliding scale is there, and it's the cost cap is an excuse to put it in there, then fine by me, because I quite like the scaling. I feel like that is the most detrimental to performance thing there, but I guess maybe I've been too anti-domination in Formula One. Maybe I'm one of those people and you just start appreciating it more.
Space says if it has to be reined in, how would you do it if not a cost cap? I don't know, Space. I'm thinking on the fly.
Yeah.
I'm being F1 fan of 30 years about this. I'm being, I don't like that change, then giving you no reason why I don't like that change, or not being able to explain it properly. It's just, I don't know. It's something that it'll grow on me when I see that it is working fully, and when it's been dealt with better. Because that, I think everybody in chat will agree, the way it was handled last year was pretty diabolical. Waiting until Max had won the championship to be able to say, oh, by the way, they broke the cost cap last year. It's like, well, hang on a minute, that's nearly a year ago. Why are we doing that now? Should that not be wrapped up? Again, you've got to do it properly, but you've got to do it quickly as well. So,
would have been interesting to see how that went as a story.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been leaked in Singapore, because there was so much that was being thrown around with cost cap for a month and a half until about USA, Mexico or something, where we properly had a report out that essentially said what everyone knew, that it was catering and things like that, and then and Red Bull taking a risk on not having to pay someone's salary, which because they thought of a gardening leave kind of thing, but it was in the contract that they would have to pay it, and there's two ways of looking at, aggressive spending being part of it, which I agree, but it was also, that was just a bit thick, and I don't think it will happen again, that kind of thing. Because I do think there was an element of it that was just a bit. We've been on this for ages now, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll roll on for it.
I'm okay with.
I do just want to answer one point now, because Space and I, we disagree a lot, but I think we respect each other. He says, I don't think you've made an actual argument against the cost cap, aside from I don't like it. Why? Couple of points. Firstly, I don't have to give a reason. If I don't like something, I don't have to explain it. But what I will say, that's tongue-in-cheek, by the way, what I will say is I have kind of explained it in that, and I'm going to sound like such a Tory, and let me stress I am not a Tory, but I'm going to sound like such a Tory. But I think if you earn your money, you should be allowed to spend it how you want, is point one. And secondly, I believe it's the CFD restrictions and the scale there that is what has made the difference, and the cost cap hasn't made the difference in terms of levelling the field. It has financially, but it hasn't in terms of performance. It's the scaling that has helped, as my example was Aston Martin, rather than the fact they can't spend as much as Red Bull, for example. Whatever. I'm trying to explain it as best I can. If it's not coming across, then I'm apologising, but also I don't really care enough.
If I'm see where it goes. I think
yeah. We're talking about after 2 years, aren't we?
We need to be so much on staff, that you can only so many people can then keep all the good people on huge contracts, which I guess even more annoying.
Yeah,
but
just like I say, we are only in properly year 2 of this, aren't we? Because we had the dummy run, if you like. So we are really in year 2 of this. So I might change my opinion in 2 or 3 years' time. I might change it at the end of the year. But at the moment, I just think if a team makes an absolute fortune, they should be able to spend that money how they want, and that's how I view it in Formula One. But equally, I'm not gonna say it again. I've said it 2 or 3 times now. Let's find another question. It isn't cost cap related. Anything on the race would be great. This is a race reaction, so it'd be good to talk about the race a little bit. Sorry, Space. I'm absolutely not, I promise. Back markers won't benefit, but the midfield will massively. Says Curious. If you take Red Bull out of the equation, would you still think that looking at the other teams about the cost cap might have levelled the field just in the wrong place? No, because again, I think it's a CFD. Because again, we're still on the cost cap. I'm coming off it in 1 second, but let me just say this: just because the cost cap is whatever it is, say set the cost cap at 100 million, that doesn't mean Williams are going to spend 100 million. Yes, it reins others in, but they can spend it. They can be clever with it. It's like the penalty for Red Bull. I don't think it's going to hit them at all later in the season because they can be strategic, and that's what people can be with their money, which, yes, is a good thing. But equally, again, for the 15th time, for me, it's the CFD that's made the difference. But I'm sure somebody in the comments later to call me a see you next Tuesday for having a different opinion to them. But there you go. I'm going to come away from the cost cap and try and find a question from earlier on. Let's see what we've got while everyone debates that and disagrees with me, which is fine. Which is why this is why I don't get into it too much, because I can't explain it very well. And then everyone disagrees, and we just end up in an argument, and we talk about it for 9 hours. Del says mice don't live particularly long, do they? I don't know. I don't know if that's a wider point you're making, Del, but I don't know. Do you think Max will win the World Drivers' Championship 2023, says Clansome. You can have that one, Freddie, while I have a drink. Do you think Max is going to win the championship? Oh, it's close.
This year?
Yeah.
Oh, one sec. I'll have to really dwell on this question. I think he will win it this year. I think it's more of a question of whether he does it in Japan or not. I think he's got it. As much as I was enjoying the Perez hype train of the first couple of races where he was doing genuinely good performances, but if his bad performance isn't second, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, he was, he held Max off in Saudi. He was the better driver in Baku, but I just don't think it's going to last. And I think just looking at the gap being whatever it is now, 53 points between them, and you need if it's a 1-2 in Perez's favour for 15 races, then I can't do the maths on the fly for that, but it's still only close. So that would be something like it would work, but it's just I can't see that happening. I can only see Max just having the odd race where he's wildly in front, and then Perez having the odd race where unfortunately it seems to go wrong for him. It's just the way it crumbles, unfortunately. And when you've got one driver who can hop in the car and automatically be fast in Max, then there's not going to be a championship fight. But yeah, my money's on him winning it in Suzuka again, really. Maybe Qatar, somewhere like that. I keep forgetting the sort of random order of the calendar that's thrown itself around. But I know we went through a run of Lewis winning in Mexico and USA and sort of with 3 to go.
Somebody said earlier in the chat they thought Mexico. It could be Mexico where he does it. Somebody, I can't remember who was in the chat, so apologies for that. But it depends if Checo can turn up every weekend, doesn't it? And fight him. I'm just not sure that he will. And I love Checo. I'd love to see him fight for it, but I don't think it's going to happen this year or probably any year, if I'm being quite honest. But yeah, I'm trying to think. It could be around Japan again, which is very early, isn't it? Which would be 6 races early. So somewhere in there, maybe. I mean, I will say this, and I think even non-Max Verstappen fans would appreciate this point. As unlikely as it might seem, imagine the scenes at Zandvoort if he does it there. Oh, good God. It'd be insane. We've got a decision, by the way, on Mercedes, just as breaking news.
Okay.
So they've been fined. The team has been fined €10,000. That's hefty. Stewards received a report from the media delegate, which was subsequently confirmed by video evidence that the physios and the driver's assistants of cars 44, Hamilton, and 63, Russell, entered part firme in violation of the post-race interview and podium ceremony procedure that was published prior to the race for the orderly conduct of the event. That's in breach of Article 12.2.1i of the International Sporting Code and Article 9.15.1. The same one says the responsibility for the actions on the part of any person providing a service on the competitor to whom the service is provided. So that's Mercedes' fault, basically. And it's a €10,000 fine. So we said fine, didn't we, Freddie? So that's not really a great surprise there. But that's what that was. So basically, physios and that had a wander into part firme way too early, and then that's against the rules, and there you go. So I'm sure there'll be a few people screaming that's a fix, and it should all be throwing them out of the World Championship and banning them for life. But the internet. That's no surprise there.
It's just been. It's not surprising at all. It's just what's happened, isn't it? Just the little things.
Thank you, Austin, for your super chat. Says, do you think if McLaren can't produce a good car by the end of the year, Norris leaves next year? If yes, where would he go? Thank you very much for your support there with your super chat. Thank you for that. It's a good question, actually, on Norris. And I talked about Leclerc with Nate in midweek when people talk about him leaving. And I sort of made the point that it's all right, Leclerc, if he wanted to leave Ferrari, but where does he go? And it's sort of the same for Norris in a way. He might turn around and say, do you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. This is terrible. I want to leave. But where does he go? Because Red Bull are probably tied down for next year. I can't see Perez going anywhere as long as he finds his feet again, because it's been a bit of a shaky couple of races. Mercedes, unless Hamilton retires, that's all tied off. Aston Martin aren't going to make a change. Ferrari aren't going to make a change. Alpine won't make a change. He's not going to want to go to a Haas or an Alfa Romeo or an AlphaTauri or Williams unless he thinks Alfa Romeo long-term with Audi is a good pick. I don't know, but if he wants results now, Alfa Romeo isn't going to be the team for him now, is it? So I think the only hope for him would be that if Perez continues to struggle and Red Bull decide to make a change, that would be his only hope, but I don't see that happening. So, because I think Perez is under contract as well, although you can get out of contracts, of course. Others have been under contracts at Red Bull and lost their seat, so it happens. But I think Norris, and I don't mean this as sort of a dig at McLaren or anything, but he's sort of almost stuck there, isn't he, now, until either seats open up elsewhere or his contract runs out and everything sort of falls his way. But I don't see where he goes if he does decide to leave. And I think McLaren, of the other options, is the best place to be, even if they are struggling.
Yeah, I agree with you. I can't see a gap. That's the problem. I think if Perez was doing awfully and Red Bull wanted rid of him, maybe they would consider getting Norris. But no gap at Merc, no gap at Ferrari, no gap at Alpine. Alfa Romeo going into Audi, yeah, I completely agree, is probably the one that there would be space. But
Andreas Seidel's there as well,
no
isn't he?
saying that. Yeah, Andreas Seidel's there, and he obviously rates Lando massively and was really influential in the success of his career. But it's just, there's no saying what that's going to be for the future. And for the short term, like you say, it's exactly the same as where he's at. So I think from what he's sort of saying, Lando, is he's very much preparing himself for the McLaren haul anyway, I think. I wouldn't be surprised if this conversation was perhaps more summer next year, when a few things expire and so on. But I reckon he's got a team right behind him. He's got a team that's really backed him and brought him into Formula One and working for him. And even if the performance isn't there this year, the team is his team at the moment, and that would make it easier to stay.
Yeah. Just to answer Nick's point, it says 1 week Checo is challenging for the championship, the next his seat is under threat. Too many knee-jerk reactions. I'm not saying Checo's seat's under threat. I'm just saying
under threat.
if he continues like this over the next 10 races, then Helmut Marko might decide off you go. But at the moment, he's not under any threat. And just to be clear, I've never said Checo can challenge for the championship. I want him to challenge for the championship. It's not all about the championship. It's about the racing, and we've got some fantastic racing in behind. However, it would be nice to have a good championship fight as well, and I'd love Checo to be there, but he's not going to be in that fight now. So I've never said he would be. In fact, I think I said from pretty much the off that, and I think long before I had the stream with Nate and Freddie today, I think I said right at the start of the season that I could see it being another Bottas 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 situation. Everyone hoping there's going to be a fight for the championship, but there won't be because Verstappen is just on another level. That's not a dig at Checo. It's, Hamilton was on another level to Bottas. Verstappen's on another level to Checo. Michael Schumacher was on another level to Barrichello, for example. So I don't think Checo's seat is actually under threat at all, unless he carries on as he is at the moment for the next 10 races, let's say, and doesn't really pick up the form, and it costs Red Bull points. I mean, it's not the cost of the championship, is it? Let's be honest. But so yeah, I'm not. Just to be clear, I'm not for a second saying Perez is actually under any threat.
If Checo has more races only has races like Monaco and Spain today, then you ask the question. But not at all. He's won 2 races this year out of 7. He won the sprint.
And if he's the second driver, his job is, like Bottas, is there to help the team win the constructors. And if he does that, then he's doing his job, isn't he?
He's doing it, yeah. He's doing the job. I agree, they should keep him at the moment.
I don't think there's a better alternative at the moment, honestly, unless a Norris becomes available. But even then, you're relying on Norris leaving McLaren, hopping in that Red Bull, getting up to speed very quickly. Because it was sort of, remember, this is a random one, but you sort of, back when Mercedes had George Russell at Williams, and people saying, "Oh, move Russell up," but at that point, Mercedes were winning championships, and they had more to lose. Red Bull are kind of there now; they have more to lose, risking bringing a new driver in than they do. I'm not saying Norris is necessarily a risk, but you've still got to hope that he can get up to speed. So if Checo is doing enough to win you constructors championships like Bottas was at Mercedes, there's no reason to swap him out. You've got too much to lose in that situation to risk that. So I think Checo's fine, but as Space has just said in chat, there's always people calling for Checo's head, and it was the same for Bottas.
Can be sacked for doing well, can't they?
Yeah.
Checo was obviously kicked out of Aston Martin just because Vettel was on the market, even though Checo was doing really well and won a race. But obviously won the race after the contractual stuff, but he was doing fantastically. So there are elements of sometimes teams just do what they want on things, but Red Bull, I think, have been very... Sergio Perez is in that seat because of performance, and I think that's a crucial part of it. He's not there just because he's there.
Dell says, why do we keep up this Constructors' Championship matters meme? Teams don't care about it. Second driver's job is to help win the Drivers' Championship. or win the Drivers' Championship if number one struggles. Sorry, Dell, that's nonsense, mate. The Constructors' Championship is what pays the money. Yes, the Drivers' Championship comes with the most prestige, but it's the Constructors' Championship that pays the teams money, so the teams care about that over the Drivers' Championship. They love having a world champion, of course they do, like Verstappen or a Hamilton, but ultimately the prize money comes from where you finish in the Constructors, so that's why they care about it. They absolutely do care about it. If they didn't, then they wouldn't have a team's championship or a Constructors' Championship. So it's the second driver's job to back up, you're right, back up the driver's champion or the number one driver, but they're also there to help the team win the Constructors. And yes, there is sponsorship money with the Drivers' Championship, but the money from the Constructors' Championship is massive for some teams. And it literally, can you remember going back to Brazil 2012, I think it was, and how critical that move by Vitaly Petrov on the Manor was, or the Marussia as it was at the time, because without that move, Caterham could have gone under. It's so important. Yeah, maybe it means more to the teams further down the field, the positions in the Constructors' Championship in terms of money, because Red Bull are going to be loaded whatever, aren't they? Let's be fair. But they absolutely do care about the Constructors. Also, there's the CFD time, as Nick Surface is pointing out, to consider with the Constructors. But
yes.
But you have to. I get the point that Nick's making. He says nowadays the Constructors gives you less CFD time. Yes, it does. But these are racers. They're not. Red Bull people say, why would Mercedes want to finish second when they can finish third and get more CFD time? Because they're racers. They don't want to finish second and third. They want to finish first, and if they can't finish first, they want to be as close to it as they possibly can be. So there's no doubt the Constructors is taken seriously, as far as I'm concerned. But each to their own. Some people really don't care about the Constructors at all, from the fan side of things. I don't know how you feel, Freddie.
I care about it, but I mean it's an F1 competition, so I'm going to care about it. I think on your point there, I think if you're fighting for the Drivers' Championship as a team, and like say 21 where it's so ridiculous with Max and Lewis, then yeah, the Drivers' one is the headline. You're going to focus on that, which is why even though Merck won the Constructors, it was so despondent, because obviously we know that race and everything that happened, and the whole year for that being so mad and ridiculous and tight. So obviously that's going to be a huge deal. But straight below that, you had Ferrari and McLaren trying to be third in the Constructors, and I couldn't tell you at all where any of their drivers finished in the championship standings, but that Ferrari did manage to pip McLaren for third in the Constructors' Championship in 2021. So there's different elements of importance to both championships, and they all hold success in different ways.
Yeah, let's have a look for questions, and then we'll wrap up. Freddie, I'll do a couple more.
Let's go.
I did see one asking about the final corner, whether that helped. It was from Clanton, says the last corner helped Mercedes today, ?
I don't know.
It's a good
question. It's
actually.
easy for them to pass like Lance Stroll and Sainz.
Yeah, let us know in chat. Do you think
overtaken?
Do you think the final corner, chat? Let us know in chat, yes or no. Did the final corner help Mercedes today? The change there to that final corner. I'm honestly not sure. I didn't really consider that. So thank you, Clanton. That's something to have a look into before the next preview and all of that business, because that could be an interesting one. But yeah, let us know in chat, and I'll see what you guys are saying. But it didn't seem. There was an onboard at one point that it didn't seem as difficult to follow through there as I thought it might do. I'm sure it was dirty air and all that, because it's not easy to follow through those corners, but it didn't look as bad as I thought some were predicting. But I'm not sure if it helped Mercedes. So Nick says it probably helped Red Bull. I absolutely believe it helped Red Bull, because the Monaco was supposed to be their weak spot. Jesus. Monaco was supposed to be their weak spot, and that was all slow corners. So you'd think slow corners maybe not good for the Red Bull. And I think a lot of people would argue that is the case. So with that chicane gone, I think that would have helped them today. Definitely Red Bull, but it's Mercedes, an interesting one. RC Parker say so. They've been great in high-speed corners all year, but I think the corner helps everyone. Clanton says it helped Mercedes. John says it would have helped to keep them in touch for the DRS. Good point, but not so much for any of the other teams. Interesting. Yeah, I'm going to have a look into that after this stream, actually. And that doesn't really help anybody now. Thank you, Clanton. No, I appreciate that one.
Yeah.
I can't answer it exactly right now, but we'll have a look. I'll tell you what, Freddie, give us your Canada prediction, mate. I'll do my preview, and then I can do that then. But if you want to throw in a Canada prediction, that's from Waldo.
Just a random Canada prediction, or like results and things.
You can do results. You can do random. You can do a bit of both if you want, mate. You know, we'll see it. We'll see a cat jump in and steal a Mercedes or something. I don't know. That's bold.
That is bold. I don't think we're going to have any sort of 5-second penalty deciding the result on the road this year, to reopen that can of worms. But I think it's going to get a Williams in Q3. I think that the Ferrari is going to be within a tenth of pole. There we go. That's my weird prediction. And I think that it's going to be a Rebel 1-2 anyway, though, in Verstappen's favour. There we go. I basically just said the normal things.
Yeah, basically Red Bull win it.
Yeah.
3 wins in a row already. If he wins Canada, it's going to be epic, says Helamal. Just have a quick look through the chat, see if there's anything else. If not, we'll wrap it up. John Marshall wanted random predictions. So, but it's difficult to go random or bold because Red Bull will be strong, won't they?
Yeah. Something really random. Some races I can just have a complete feeling that something will happen.
What about Stroll in his home race, nicking a surprise podium? That's random and bold.
Lovely. I'd be really happy for that if that could happen. The Aston Martin have taken themselves out of the conversation today, but they definitely should be in it for Canada. That kind of track, I think, would work for them. I think a champion will crash in the Wall of Champions. There we go. Because I don't remember the last time a champion did crash in the Wall of Champions. But I can weirdly see Alonso doing it.
It's sort of become the used to be Wall of Champions, hasn't it? In recent years.
Yeah, exactly. It was Wall of Champions in 1999, and now it's just a wall. But I can see Alonso whacking it in there for some reason.
Here's a quick yes or no for you. Is Max going to break his win record this year? I'm going to say yes. 15 is the record.
Yes.
He's got 3 million already. What's he at? 5 already. So, yeah.
I think he is. There's no early races for Ferrari this year.
Final one then. CPB1 says, what race do you think another team can beat Red Bull at this season? I've got the schedule open because I spotted your question. That's a very good question. I think...
It's a good question.
I think if you're looking at... So working on the assumption, and this is me with my lack of technical knowledge showing, but if we look at the assumption that Monaco, where they won comfortably, was their weak spot, then you could maybe make an argument for a street track like a Singapore. I know they're very different street tracks, but maybe that could be with all the 90-degree lefts and rights. Maybe that's a potential weak spot for them, potentially. Or Sao Paulo, Brazil, they struggled there last year. I know setup was one of the reasons, but although, by the way, very quickly, I did see a great conspiracy theory, not a conspiracy theory, but a great theory on that Red Bull, and I don't believe it, but I thought it was quite funny, so I'm going to mention it. But apparently Red Bull, some people think that Red Bull deliberately went the wrong way on setup in Brazil to lead Mercedes into a false sense of security, and then they wouldn't change their concept. And I thought, that's a really nice theory if Mercedes hadn't already probably decided at that point they were sticking with the concept and the car was already largely ready for 2023. But yeah, just a random one there. It doesn't mean anything. But I think maybe, because Brazil could be a bit of a leveler, can't it, with the altitude? So you could argue Mexico.
Brazil's been weird with that, yeah.
Yeah, but I'd say Singapore would be my initial pick without thinking too much about it, because it is the 90 right, 90 lefts, which might give perhaps maybe give Red Bull a headache. I don't think they will win every race this season, but I don't think they're going to be too far off, honestly.
For some reason I'm sort of thinking Zandvoort or Hungary.
There's a struggle.
Although they're faster now because the cars are faster, so it kind of takes it out of the slower speed. But there's lots of just weird bits of those tracks, and they can throw things up. As a struggle, Singapore is a really good shout. It's really hard looking at this calendar, thinking of, because they've proved themselves, haven't they? Proved themselves everywhere. Monaco is just Monaco, but it's so slow speed in Monaco.
look at the tracks we've been to: Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Azerbaijan, Miami, Monaco, Spain. They've all got very different. I know that most tracks have got different characteristics, but is there anything there that's really the same? You go Baku and Jeddah, quite high speed street tracks, I suppose, but they're not really all that the same, are they? We've been to such a variety of circuits, and as you're saying, Freddie, they've proved themselves on all of them. They've won all of them. So obviously, you have to remember as well, the gap's going to come down between Red Bull and the rest of the field as well, anyway, because of updates and things like that. But yeah, it's a tough question. I'll stick with Singapore.
I think Singapore's a really good shout. Proceeding your answer now.
So at which point that would be 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 wins. If Red Bull, assuming they don't get beaten until Singapore, that'd be 14 wins by that point of the season. That's crazy, isn't it? But madness. And deserved, by the way.
Does a bit of you want them to do the whole thing?
Yeah.
I think it'd be great.
Because it's never really been done before. And this is a conversation I was having with somebody sort of at 2:30 this morning on my other stream from Wednesday, and they were making the point that, you know, racing isn't, as stupid as it might sound to some people, racing isn't just about who wins. It's about what happens behind. It's about enjoying the sport, but also appreciating what you're witnessing. The spectacle of McLaren domination in the late 80s, the spectacle of what Schumacher and Ferrari did and what, you know, Mercedes achieved. And it's the same with Red Bull now. And there's a part of, I'd love them to do it in some ways because it's never been done before. So it'd be an F1 first and we'd be literally witnessing history. And I know some people don't take much comfort in that, but I do. You know, that's something I've watched so many periods of F1 dominance, and you kind of have to pick your battles almost in those fights. And I do. But at the same time, I'd also like competition. I'd like to see them. I don't want to see them cruise to those wins. I'd like to see them, while still appreciating what Red Bull have achieved and what they've done with their car, I do still want to see them pushed for those wins, not just disappearing 24 seconds up the road comfortably. But it would be nice. Oh, I say nice. It'd be historical. It'd be amazing, wouldn't it? It'd be quite an achievement. I mean, especially when you consider 22 races in a season, to win them all would be insane. I'm not convinced they will, but like you say, part of me would quite like to. Would quite like to.
You'd have to hand it to him.
Yeah.
I think it's possible.
We'll leave it there because Not a Pirate is just that's the 2-hour mark, so we'll call it there. I didn't know I had somebody who kept an eye out for that one, but there you go. Thank you very much, Freddie, mate. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again soon. I'll stand by what we said at the start. It was a pretty decent race. I don't think it was the greatest, but it was a pretty decent race, and I enjoyed that, and it was good to talk to you about it.
Thanks for having me. It's been great fun. My first stream, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, the race was there, but it had the talking points. That's why we've been here for 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was good fun.
That and the fact we're F1 fans, and apparently F1 fans can do nothing but talk.
Yeah, exactly.
Apparently. But thank you very much, mate, and I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Been great fun, and hopefully see you all soon. And keep supporting Sean.
Yes. All right. Cheers, mate. Thank you to Freddie. Thank you to you guys as well for tuning in. That is it for this one then. For the Spain one. Oh, just close the poll quickly, actually. Good shout. Yes. What did you say in the end? What did you go with? So 41% said it was a good race. 35% said an average race. 12% said a great race. And 10% said a bad race. I don't think it was a bad race at all. I think average to good. I think I gave it a 7 and somebody said a 6.5. So that's what I say. So thank you very much for your super chats and your interactions today. Please do leave a like before you disappear. 186 likes. We're only 14 away from 200. Let's get that to 200. And that's always appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe as well if you are new, so you don't miss out on any future content. I will be back. I'm hoping to do something. It kind of depends on life and other things, but hoping to do something between now and Canada. But obviously Canada will be the preview and, of course, the reaction. Hoping to do some other stuff around race weekends as well. But yes, it comes when it comes. As I won't finish that line. Let's not even go there. Yeah, I'm going to disappear before I say something really, really stupid. But thank you for your chat tonight. It's been great. Apologies if you're watching this later and it's over 2 hours and you're grumpy because they shouldn't last 2 hours. But hey, it's why we're live. We like to talk about Formula One. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.